Hello YouTubers, so some of you might be confused as to why the Umbrella Academy doesn't disappear from existence, and the reason for that is actually something called the grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox is basically saying that if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, technically wouldn't you disappear because your grandfather died? That's actually false. And the reason for that is because if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, then technically you would have never been born to go back in time to kill him in the first place. This is where the alternate dimensions and alternate timelines is, born and stuff, and that's why it's called a paradox. And the reason for that is because basically there would be two dimensions: one where you killed your grandfather and you cease to exist, and one where you never killed your grandfather and you continue to exist. And then I'm assuming there's going to be a third dimension where somehow both are maintained through that paradox. Wow, that was my fingers in the camera. Alright, so that's kind of like what's happening here in the Umbrella Academy. So essentially, the Umbrella Academy went back to the 60s, which was actually necessary in their time stream. So that means that in Season 2, when you saw Luther get hit in the head with the fire extinguisher, that was actually already happening. Like, everything that happened in Season 2 had already happened prior to Season 1. It's kind of weird to wrap your brain around, but that's the way time travel works. So essentially in the Umbrella Academy, when they went from 2019 to the 60s and they created the alternate timeline, I guess you could say technically that's not an alternate timeline, it's just kind of like the Umbrella Academy's predestined future. It's kind of weird to wrap your brain around, but I guess that's how the paradox holds up and shit like that. Okay, so basically the Umbrella Academy in 2019 went back in time to the 60s, messed up a bunch of stuff, stepped on a bunch of butterflies, etc., and then they created the Sparrowverse. So in the Sparrowverse, obviously, Sir Reginald Hargreaves ends up adopting different kids, except for number 5, apparently. Maybe Luther, who knows? Who knows what the authors are going to do this time? I mean, the comics are a little bit different. So, basically, the reason why the Umbrella Academy doesn't cease to exist is because if they did, then they technically would have never went back in time in the first place to create the Sparrow Academy. So, I think that's where the whole singularity thing comes in, and collapsing the universe and all of time and space around it. So, basically, the Sparrow Academy will exist no matter what, because the Umbrella Academy technically already went back in time and stepped on all those butterflies. So this means that the Sparrow Academy is technically the future. It's the future of the Umbrella Academy. Space and time aren't technically linear like the way we're taught, like the way you see it in this little here graph you see. So technically it's called space-time, so it's time and space are interchangeable. Humans are really ignorant, and we look at time and space as two separate entities, and we see time as moving forward instead of existing, in fragments, I guess you could say, in quantum physics and shit like that. So essentially, the Umbrella Academy were already predestined not to grow old in their said dimension, but in the Sparrowverse. So that was actually their destiny. So technically, the time stream was always destined to go into the Sparrowverse. So I guess you could say that the Sparrowverse is the alpha timeline, and that the Umbrella Academy is the beta timeline. So the Sparrow Academy is the oak tree, and the Umbrella Academy timeline is the acorn, I guess you could say. I don't really know if I'm making any sense. It's kind of like the movie Looper, where there's 3 different timelines, I guess you could say. So the Umbrella Academy went back in time to the 60s, stopped in a bunch of butterflies. Sir Reginald Hargreaves ended up breaking up with Grace, because she found out that he was plotting to kill the president. President dies, he gets mad, they break up. Diego ruined it all. That's one butterfly. 5 went back in time. He ended up screwing up the timeline. Vanya was supposed to find out about whatever his nuts is, and she found the book, and then time got all screwed up because number 5 went back in time, and then Vanya never found the book earlier, so then she never got mad at him, and then she ended up getting in a fight with her sister, and then, So I guess technically all this boils around to is number 5. If number 5 never time traveled, then the world never would have ended, and the paradox never would have occurred in the first place. But it did, because that's the way time works. So I guess it's kind of like destiny for everything to happen.